the oldest member in Congress has finally been beaten in a Texas primary. That's right, 91-year-old Representative Ralph Hill was defeated by his Tea Party challenger, John Ratcliffe. Now, Ratcliffe received 53% of the vote, which is a pretty solid majority. Now, there were a couple of things that I found sort of interesting about this primary challenge. First of all, it was the first Tea Party win of this year, which is kind of amazing because they've been getting their ass kicked the whole time. And another thing I found interesting is he was the last World War II veteran serving in Congress. The other one, of course, being John Dingell, and he is, of course, retiring at the end of the year. And another thing, the final thing that I find really, really interesting about this is the angle that Ratcliffe used to win. Basically, he's like, hey, look at this old dude. He's 91. He should be sipping lemonade on the porch or something, not serving in Congress. He's got to go. He's too old. In fact, this strategy is actually widely used, since both Ratcliffe and Hall were both incredibly conservative and had a shit ton of money backing them. Hall was backed by important players like Michelle Bachmann, Ron Paul, and other high-profile conservatives, while Ratcliffe, of course, was backed by the money, the Senate Conservatives Fund, and the Club for Growth. Now, I want to show you guys one of the ads that the Ratcliffe campaign ran against Hall, and I think you'll find this somewhat interesting.
Ralph Hall was first elected to Congress when Jimmy Carter was president. Now he's 90, the oldest member in Congress ever. But with Texas families struggling, he isn't making a difference for us anymore. Hall's a Washington insider who's voted for wasteful earmarks and to increase the debt ceiling. Times have changed. After 33 years, let's bring Ralph Hall home. This message has been paid for by Now or Never PAC.
You're old, let's send you home. That's pretty much it. Now, what do you guys think? I'm going to open this up to the panel, but first I want to ask, is this sort of a fair strategy? I mean, to hit them over the head with how old they are? And in your mind, is that really an effective strategy to win elections against what is considered untouchable incumbents, which this guy was?
It's completely dependent on, I mean, just saying, oh, the person's age, you know, whether it should or shouldn't be a factor. It depends on what their age is. I mean, people have been bringing it up in regards to Hillary for 2016. She's 66 years old. There's plenty of perfectly capable, switched-on 66-year-olds who can be president. That's fine. But when you're 90, I mean, I don't agree with anything, you know, kind of the advert saying, oh, he's voted for wasteful earmarks and so that I don't really care about. But he's 90 years old. I mean, surely, I mean, I know you want to serve your country and help out, but surely to best serve your country, there must be more capable, more energetic politicians who are out there. I think it's a perfectly legitimate strategy to attack this guy when he's 90 years old. If he was 80, I'd still probably allow the tactic. If he's 70, then it would be probably on a case-by-case basis. But yeah, 90 years old, I mean, dude, just take a break, enjoy your retirement while you still have it, while you can still walk around.
I love how you brought up Hillary about this, because this is the tactic that you see a lot of people hitting Hillary with. But Nick, let's go with you. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's very much a fair tactic, but I'm going to take a slightly different angle from what Steven said. I think it's a fair tactic if, I mean, he first enters office during the Carter years. I mean, how much has the country actually changed since then? How much of the policies, the issues, the debates, the challenges? I mean, if this guy is 90 years old, at least the stereotype of elderly people is that they're more in the past by a couple of years, maybe a decade at least, in as far as their ideas and their planning goes. So if that's the case with this guy, then I don't think he's probably in the best interest of the country at that point. Now, whether or not it's a fair tactic because it's being used against certain people that aren't really desire, or like Hillary, for example, that's a different argument. But on its face as a tactic itself, if strictly speaking age, no, but the issues that come with age, such as policy issues and positions on various topics that actually face the country now, sure, hands down.
Oh yeah, I actually think that's That's really, really a good point. And the only problem that I have too with that, though, is that both of those politicians, Ratcliffe and Hall, very, very, very conservative, and actually both of them have been very, very friendly to the Tea Party, and the Tea Party has been very friendly to them. So it's almost like you're switching out Hall for a younger version of Hall. So really, you don't really have that much of a switch. But I love in the ad, and I want to go back to this, the ad where they have to point out Jimmy Carter, and I just think it's like Jimmy Carter slam. You know what I mean? Like, oh, we're going to link him to Jimmy Carter because Jimmy Carter's the worst president in history. When in actuality, he's actually not the worst president in history. George W. Bush was the worst president, at least in recent history. And another thing about changing moods and stuff, the changing laws, policies, thank you, is that this guy Hall was a Democrat that switched over to a Republican in 2004. And he was a very conservative Democrat. And now he's, and after 2004, he got even more conservative. As far as age goes, and I know I'm veering around here. As far as age goes, it's a fair tactic, but once again, it's going to be used against like Hillary and other, Democrats. It's a fair tactic, but it's also kind of dirty.
I was just going to say it's a fair tactic in this case for this seat because there's no other way that the kind of upcoming candidate can attack him because they share pretty much identical philosophies and on policies. They have to attack on these kind of fairly superficial issues. Now, I think the age is a fairly serious issue when you're 90 years old, but when it comes to Hillary, you can attack her on policies. If he was a Democrat running against this 90-year-old, they would have said, oh, look at this old guy, and because he's old, look at all the kind of that old age mindset of all those redundant policies of the 50s and 60s. That's what a Democrat would have done. But the problem is, this new younger Republican, he can't do that because he's probably in favor of some of those older, decadent 50s and 60s policies. So he has to attack on age, and I think in this case, it's fair enough.
Right, because he's definitely Tea Party. But go ahead, Nick.
I was just going to say that actually, I think your point of when you're talking about the older mindset, based on his sort of career that you just tracked there, where he moved from a very conservative Democrat to Republican, it sounds very much like the old idea that the liberals of today are going to be the conservatives of tomorrow as the generations move progressively forward, that there is a natural tendency to want to eventually reach a point where you're like, okay, I kind of want things to stay the way they are now. I don't want things to go any further. And maybe, obviously, money and other things are a huge factor. Let's not discount that. But maybe that's actually actually evidence of his progression, that he is becoming an increasingly obsolete individual, we'll say.
So his progression is pretty much a regression, is what you're trying to say.
Basically, yeah. He's becoming more and more, became more and more obstinate in his positions and more conservative although it's hard to say because the Democrats, the left, hasn't really been very left either, especially in recent years, but at least the public perception is that.
Right. And you got to remember too that this is Texas, and so a conservative Democrat there is going to be, basically really, really right wing. I don't even know how he could call himself a Democrat, and I'm pretty sure at that point he was like, hey, you know what? Hey, I'm not a Democrat. I'm conservative. I'm going to be a Republican. I'm going to switch over. Fuck that. Democrats don't win in Texas, at least not very much.